The hearing room was tense. The kind of quiet that isn't really silence. It's the stillness before a storm. Cameras clicked, pens hovered above notepads, and the nation leaned in as one of the most controversial figures in recent American politics prepared to speak. Former Attorney General Bill Barr, known for his sharp tongue and reputation for shielding powerful figures, was about to launch into a blistering attack. His target: Representative Jasmine Crockett, a rising Democratic voice unafraid to confront authority head-on. At first glance, it seemed like an uneven match. Barr, with decades of legal experience, former chief of the Department of Justice, and one of the most recognizable figures in conservative legal circles, versus Crockett, a relatively newer face in Congress. Yet what unfolded shocked not only those in the room, but also millions who would later watch the fiery exchange unfold online. Why? Because Crockett didn't just withstand the assault, she flipped it. Barr came armed with accusations and narratives meant to discredit her. But what he didn't expect was Crockett's arsenal of proof, meticulously prepared, devastating in its precision, and impossible to ignore. This wasn't just a clash of personalities. It was a collision of two Americas, one rooted in power bluster and selective storytelling, the other grounded in facts, preparation, and unshakable courage. In today's political climate, Americans are drowning in misinformation. Narratives get spun faster than they can be fact-checked. And too often the loudest voice, not the most truthful one, wins the moment. Bill Barr, for many, represents this very dynamic. A seasoned insider who knows how to bend narratives in ways that protect the powerful Jasmine Crockett, however, represents something different. Her sharp legal mind, her ability to cut through noise, and her refusal to be intimidated make her a rare force in a system where deference to establishment figures is often the norm. This confrontation between Barr and Crockett was more than political theater. It was a litmus test for how truth can survive in a room designed to suffocate it. Think about it. How often do we see politicians armed with actual proof? Not just talking points dismantle lies in real time. How often do we witness a rising leader turn what should have been a humiliating ambush into a moment of triumph? This exchange matters because it demonstrates a larger truth. Facts still matter, but only if there are people willing to defend them. In this breakdown, we'll walk you through the build-up. How Barr positioned himself, the narratives he leaned on, and the atmosphere that set the stage for confrontation. The confrontation, a moment-by-moment account of Barr's attacks and Crockett's explosive reply that left the room stunned. The immediate aftermath. How media outlets spun the story, how supporters and critics reacted, and what it meant in the short term. The bigger picture. Why this clash resonates beyond just one hearing, and what it teaches us about truth, power, and accountability in democracy. Your role in this story. Because democracy isn't just shaped in hearing rooms, it's shaped in conversations, choices, and actions taken by ordinary citizens like you. This isn't just a story about Barr and Crockett. It's about you. Because what happened in that room reflects battles happening every single day. In schools, workplaces, media feeds, and dinner tables across America. Lies are loud, but truth can be louder if we choose to wield it. In a world full of confident fiction, it only takes one person with facts to change everything. That's the heartbeat of what you're about to see unfold. Barr entered the hearing with confidence, but Crockett had something stronger: facts, and the courage to use them. Stay with this story and you'll not only understand what happened, you'll see how it happened, why it mattered, and what it reveals about the moment we're living through. This isn't just about politics. This is about the power of preparation, the necessity of truth, and the reminder that even the loudest lie can be dismantled when faced with irrefutable proof. So let's step into the room together. Let's watch the storm build, the confrontation ignite, and the aftermath ripple outward. Because once you see how Jasmine Crockett turned the tables on Bill Barr, you'll never look at political takedowns the same way again. Before the cameras rolled and before the headlines captured the confrontation that would soon go viral, there was a build-up, a long simmering tension that made this clash almost inevitable. To understand why the exchange between Bill Barr and Jasmine Crockett landed with such force, you have to look at the stage on which it unfolded, a political climate buzzing with distrust, a Congress fraught with division, and a former Attorney General determined to control the narrative at any cost. This wasn't just another hearing. It was a pressure cooker, where narratives, reputations, and even the concept of truth itself collided. Every congressional hearing has its own rhythm. Some are dull, dragging through procedural questions that never reach the evening news. Others are staged events designed less for substance and more for sound bites. But this hearing was different. Bill Barr came prepared to defend himself and his previous actions as Attorney General, particularly his role in shaping narratives about investigations tied to powerful political figures. Barr's reputation precedes him, a legal heavyweight who knows how to spin, deflect, and discredit opponents. He is, for many conservatives, the embodiment of law and order. For his critics, he is the master manipulator who bends the law to protect allies and undermine accountability. On the other side of the table sat Representative Jasmine Crockett. While Barr was a seasoned Washington insider, Crockett represented something newer, sharper, and more disruptive. She wasn't interested in bowing to titles or reputations. Her background as a trial lawyer gave her an instinct for cross-examination and a habit of preparing meticulously before walking into high-stakes exchanges. The room itself reflected the nation's tension. On one side, conservative members and Barr's defenders ready to amplify his talking points. On the other, progressives and allies of Crockett eager for a chance to puncture what they saw as Barr's carefully maintained facade. The public tuned in not just to hear Barr defend himself, but to see whether anyone could actually challenge him effectively. To understand why the air was so thick with tension, you have to look at Barr's pattern. Over and over again, he has leaned on a strategy that many in Washington have perfected. Say it loudly, say it confidently, and hope no one calls you out in real time. Selective truths. Barr had a history of presenting partial information, using half-truths to shape public perception, while leaving out the inconvenient details. Legal jargon as a shield. By cloaking arguments in complex legal terms, he often created confusion, making it harder for opponents to break through. Discrediting the opposition instead of fully defending his own record. Barr frequently turned the spotlight onto his critics, questioning their competence or motives. These methods worked for years, because too often challengers weren't fully prepared. They underestimated him or relied too much on passion without the receipts needed to win the argument. But this time was different. Crockett wasn't walking in with just talking points. She had evidence. She had case files, reports, and a strategy. She understood Barr's tactics and was ready to dismantle them in real time. By the time the hearing began, expectations were already sky high. Media outlets framed the day as a showdown. Conservative commentators expected Barr to emerge unscathed, portraying him as the steady hand against radical Democrats. Progressive outlets meanwhile whispered that Crockett could be the one to finally pierce Barr's defenses. For the public, it was about more than two personalities. This was about whether the truth could survive in a political environment where misinformation often spreads faster than facts. Viewers carried their own skepticism into the moment. Many believed Barr would dominate simply because of his stature and history of controlling narratives. Others saw Crockett as a fiery but untested challenger, unsure whether she could translate her courtroom skills into the political arena. It became clear even before his opening statements that Barr's plan was familiar. Attack first, discredit later. By going on the offensive against Crockett's credibility, he hoped to weaken her before she could strike. Repeat and reinforce. He leaned on rehearsed talking points, repeating them with authority to create the illusion of truth. Frame himself as the victim. By portraying himself as the target of partisan attacks, Barr aimed to rally sympathy and distract from the substance of the questions. But what Barr didn't anticipate was how precisely Crockett had anticipated every single move. Unlike many of her colleagues who rely heavily on staff summaries, Crockett immersed herself in the details. She read the documents. She studied the transcripts. She knew not only what Barr had said, but also what he hadn't said, and why those omissions mattered. Crockett approached the hearing the way she would a courtroom trial. Facts over flair. Instead of trying to outshout Barr, she built her arsenal on cold hard evidence, receipts in hand. She prepared binders filled with documents, timelines and quotes, ready to be pulled out at the perfect moment. Control of tone. Crockett understood that her strength wouldn't come from being the loudest voice, but from being the most unshakable presence in the room. This preparation meant that while Barr came armed with confident fiction, Crockett came armed with explosive proof. Outside the hearing raw. Millions of Americans were watching. Social media was primed for clips that could go viral within seconds. Pundits were ready to spin the outcome in real time, and regular citizens tired of lies and half-truths wanted anyone to finally cut through the fog. Crockett knew the stakes weren't just about her reputation or Barr's narrative. This was about giving the public something they rarely see: a politician unafraid to call out lies with evidence in hand. As Barr began to launch his attacks, mocking Crockett's legal skills and dismissing her questions as partisan theater, the room grew tighter. His words were sharp, designed to draw laughter or nods of agreement from allies. But Crockett didn't flinch. She didn't interrupt. She let him build his narrative brick by brick, knowing she was about to knock it down in a single strike. The stage was set. Barr had overplayed his hand, assuming Crockett would wilt under pressure. What he didn't realize was that she had been waiting for this exact setup, and the proof she carried wasn't just enough to respond. It was enough to destroy his entire premise. Instantly, the room could feel it. The tension had gone from simmering to boiling. Viewers leaned closer to their screens, sensing that the exchange was about to shift from a routine political spat to something far more explosive. Barr was still confident, still smirking, still convinced he had the upper hand. But Crockett was moments away from unleashing the evidence that would change everything. This wasn't just going to be a reply. It was going to be the kind of moment that leaves even the most seasoned political veteran speechless. And with that, the buildup was complete. The storm was ready to break. The room was already tense. The long hours of posturing, crosstalk, and rehearsed speeches had worn down the audience's patience. But when it came time for Representative Jasmine Crockett to take her to Warren against former Attorney General Bill Barr, the energy shifted. Viewers leaned forward. Reporters raised their pens. Cameras zoomed in. Something was about to happen. And then it did. Barr leaned back in his chair, his body language telling a story all its own. He smirked, rolled his eyes, and tapped his fingers impatiently on the table. He had done this 1,000 times before. His career was filled with high-stakes hearings, and he had outmaneuvered senators and representatives alike. So when Crockett began her questioning, Barr seemed almost bored. His strategy was obvious: taunt, dismiss, and derail. He interrupted her first line of questioning with a sneer. "Barr, Congresswoman, with all due respect, I don't think you fully understand how the law actually works. These are complicated matters, far beyond sound bites." The room chuckled. Some of his allies nodded approvingly. The stage was set for another round of what he assumed would be partisan theater. But Crockett didn't take the bait. She didn't raise her voice or break composure. She simply looked him in the eye, smiled slightly, and said, "Crockett, Mr. Barr, I practiced law long before I entered Congress, and unlike you, I don't hide behind selective interpretations. Let's stick to the facts, shall we?" Crockett knew the first step wasn't to drop her proof immediately. It was to seize control of the room. And she did it with precision. She asked direct, targeted questions, each one requiring a yes or no. Barr tried to wiggle free with long-winded answers, but Crockett cut him off calmly. "Crockett, Mr. Barr, yes or no? Did you personally edit and release a summary of the Mueller report before the public could see it?" Barr: "Well, Congresswoman, What I did was entirely standard practice. Crockett, that's not the question. Yes or no? The audience gasped. She wasn't going to let him filibuster. The subtle shift was immediate. Barr was on defense. Once she had the room's attention, Crockett began dismantling his credibility. She laid out example after example of Barr using misleading statements in past hearings. She cited his testimony about the Russia investigation. She quoted his statements on obstruction of justice. She highlighted his framing of law enforcement crackdowns. Each time she paired his words with the receipts, official reports, court filings, and memos that contradicted him. Crockett, you told the American people there was no obstruction. Yet here, page 182 of the Mueller report lists 10 separate instances where obstruction was investigated. That's not my interpretation, Mr. Barr. That's the special counsel's own words. The silence in the room was telling. Barr shifted in his chair. His smirk faded slightly. Sensing his discomfort, Barr reverted to his old tactics. He mocked Crockett's persistence. Barr, Congresswoman, with all due respect, I've been doing this a lot longer than you. Perhaps if you had the experience I have, you'd see the bigger picture. It was meant as a put down a reminder of his stature, but instead it opened the door for Crockett's knockout blow. Crockett leaned forward, placed a thick binder on the desk, and flipped it open deliberately. The sound echoed across the chamber. Crockett, Mr. Barr, you want to talk about experience? Let's talk about evidence. Because while you were busy spinning narratives, I was busy reading what you left out. She pulled out a document, an internal memo. Barr had referenced selectively in his defense. On national television, she read the parts he had ignored. Crockett, this memo, which you cited as exoneration, explicitly states, and I quote, the evidence gathered raises substantial questions of obstruction of justice that warrant further examination. You left that part out, didn't you? Barr stammered. He tried to deflect. Barr, Congresswoman, that's taken out of context. Crockett, no, Mr. Barr, that's in context. You edited the context. The room erupted. Gasps, murmurs, even a few audible exclamations. Social media exploded instantly with clips of the exchange. Once she had landed the blow, Crockett didn't let up. She methodically went through other examples. Times when Barr had given the impression of clarity, while omitting inconvenient details. Each one reinforced the same point. He wasn't a truth-teller. He was a narrative spinner. The more evidence she laid out, the more Barr faltered. His once polished demeanor gave way to irritation. He raised his voice. He interrupted her. He even gestured dismissively as though waving away the truth could make it disappear. But Crockett stayed composed. She never raised her voice. She never lost her rhythm. She simply continued laying brick after brick until the wall of his defense collapsed entirely. As her allotted time began to close, Crockett delivered the line that would echo far beyond the hearing. Crockett, Mr. Barr, you may have spent years perfecting the art of confident fiction. But here's the truth. The law doesn't bend to your ego, and the facts don't disappear just because you ignore them. You tried to deceive the American people. Today the record sets itself straight. Barr had no reply. He opened his mouth, closed it, then leaned back in silence. For the first time, the man who once commanded hearings with ease looked utterly speechless. The shift in atmosphere was undeniable. Progressive members leaned forward, some smiling, others shaking their heads in disbelief at the boldness of the takedown. Conservative allies of Barr avoided eye contact, scribbling notes as though distraction could erase what they had just witnessed. Reporters typed furiously, knowing they had just seen the headline moment of the day. Even the chair of the committee, usually eager to gavel down heated exchanges, sat still, perhaps realizing that history was being written in that very instant. On social media, the moment went viral within minutes. Clips of Barr fumbling for words juxtaposed with Crockett's calm, fact-driven delivery spread like wildfire. Hashtags like Crockett destroys, Barr and receipts. Matter trended instantly. News outlets scrambled to update their coverage. What was initially framed as a tense but routine hearing was now billed as a historic takedown. Commentators across the spectrum debated whether Barr's credibility had been permanently damaged. For ordinary viewers, the moment was cathartic. After years of watching powerful officials dodge questions, deflect responsibility, and weaponize narrative over fact, to see someone not only call out those distortions, but prove them wrong on the spot, felt like justice, even if only symbolically. This exchange stood out for several reasons. Preparation versus posturing. Crockett's meticulous preparation outmatched Barr's confident posturing. Facts versus fiction, instead of rhetoric. Crockett used hard evidence. Tone versus temper. While Barr grew defensive and hostile, Crockett remained composed and professional. A turning point. For many viewers, this was the first time they had seen Barr genuinely shaken and unable to maintain control. It wasn't just about winning a debate. It was about exposing a system of spin for what it truly was. As Crockett calmly closed her binder, the gavel struck, signaling the end of her allotted time. But while the formalities of the hearing marched on, everyone in the room understood what had just happened. A seismic moment had unfolded live, and its aftershocks were only beginning. Even before the hearing adjourned, whispers filled the chamber. Reporters nudged one another, exchanging hurried notes and texting updates back to their editorial teams. Staffers from both sides of the aisle pulled out their phones, knowing clips of the confrontation would be everywhere. Within minutes, Democrats leaned back with faint smiles, exchanging knowing glances, as if to say, finally, someone had the receipts and the courage to use them. Republicans, meanwhile, looked rattled. Some avoid eye contact with Barr altogether. Others huddled in quiet side conversations, already preparing spin to minimize the damage. And Barr himself, he sat uncharacteristically still. His hands folded, his expression blank. The confident smirk that had carried him through countless hearings was gone. By the time the hearing broke for recess, the media machine was in overdrive. Major outlets ran breaking banners across screens. Crockett challenges Barr. With explosive evidence, Barr, left speechless in heated exchange. Cable news cut away from scheduled programming to replay the viral moment on loop. Analysts paused to highlight the contrast between Crockett's calm command and Barr's flustered stammering. On progressive networks, anchors hailed Crockett's precision. This wasn't just a clapback. This was a systematic dismantling of Barr's credibility. On conservative outlets, commentators scrambled for framing painting Crockett as grandstanding, while quietly sidestepping the substance of her proof. Still, even they couldn't ignore the clip. Online publications from Politico to The Hill rushed out. Think pieces with headlines like, Crockett versus Barr, the exchange that stole the hearing. If the mainstream press amplified the moment, social media turned it into a cultural phenomenon. Within hours, clips of Crockett's response circulated across platforms, amassing millions of views. On Twitter, X hashtags trended globally. Crockett vs. Barr speechless. Barr facts over fiction. TikTok users clipped Crockett's most powerful line. I didn't just read the documents. I read them, overlaying it with dramatic music and text effects. Instagram Reels added slow-motion edits of her delivery, transforming the moment into a pop culture event. The virality wasn't just about entertainment. It reflected how deeply her words resonated. For many, Crockett's reply became a symbol of standing tall against established power. For others, it was a reminder that truth spoken with clarity still carries weight in a noisy world. Public reaction, however, was not monolithic. The confrontation drew strong opinions on both sides of the political spectrum. Supporters of Crockett hailed her as a rising figure who had the courage to speak truth to power. They flooded her social media with praise, calling her fearless, inspirational, and even the voice we need in this moment. Supporters of Barr downplayed the moment as political theater, arguing that Crockett's words were carefully rehearsed and designed for the cameras. Some suggested that Barr's silence wasn't shock but restraint, a choice not to escalate. Yet even among critics there was acknowledgement that Crockett had managed something unusual. She had forced a former Attorney General, a figure often viewed as untouchable in public forums, into a rare position of visible discomfort. The fallout wasn't limited to chatter. It carried tangible consequences for Jasmine Crockett, increased visibility. Overnight, her profile rose sharply. Media outlets that had barely covered her before now sought her out for interviews. Fundraising boost reports indicated that donations to her campaign surged in the days following the exchange. Political momentum. Her colleagues, especially those on her side of the aisle, applauded her for holding her ground. Some privately remarked that she had just leveled up her political career. For Bill Barr, the consequences were more complex. While his allies closed ranks around him, the damage to his credibility was undeniable. The visual of him being cornered by hard evidence was replayed endlessly. Even for those inclined to support him, the optics were damning. Some commentators speculated that his influence within conservative circles could wane. Others suggested this confrontation might haunt him in future appearances, as every tough question would now be shadowed by the memory of Crockett's takedown. Political hearings are filled with heated exchanges, but this one broke through for a few key reasons. The power of receipts. Crockett didn't just argue, she proved. She held the evidence in her hands and read it out loud, leaving no room for reinterpretation. Tone versus temper. Barr grew defensive and irritable. Crockett stayed calm, almost surgical, which only magnified the imbalance. A symbolic role. Reversal. Barr, once the nation's top legal officer, was portrayed as dodging accountability. Crockett, a relatively new Congresswoman, came across as the embodiment of it. The hunger for accountability. Audiences are tired of rhetorical sparring. They crave truth-tellers who bring substance to the table. Crockett delivered exactly that. The confrontation also marked a broader narrative shift. For years, Barr had framed himself as the consummate legal strategist, untouchable in his ability to outmaneuver political opponents. But Crockett punctured that image. From now on, when Barr's name appeared in headlines, many would remember not his confident defenses, but his speechless stumble in front of Crockett's evidence. And for Crockett, the moment solidified her role, not just as a lawmaker, but as a fighter, willing to put truth over theatrics. The immediate aftermath was noisy. Media takes social media memes, partisan spin. But beneath the chaos lay a deeper truth. This wasn't just about one exchange or one politician's embarrassment. It was about something bigger. The ongoing battle between confident fiction and inconvenient fact. The confrontation between Bill Barr and Jasmine Crockett wasn't just a heated moment in a congressional hearing. It was a mirror held up to our democracy. On the surface, it was about one man's misleading narrative and one woman's meticulous rebuttal. But beneath that, it spoke to something far larger. The ongoing struggle between truth and distortion, between accountability and impunity, between the people who demand facts and the power structures that too often evade them. In an era where native facts are tossed around as if reality itself is up for debate, Crockett's exchange with Barr stood out because it re-centered the conversation on evidence. She didn't rely on rhetoric, personal attacks, or dramatic grandstanding. Instead, she brought receipts, literal documents that cut through layers of spin. This mattered because it reminded everyone watching that truth isn't subjective. Even if powerful voices want us to think so, facts may be inconvenient, uncomfortable, or politically damaging, but they remain stubbornly immovable. Crockett showed that when someone dares to put them on the table, fiction quickly collapses. Barr's mistake wasn't just in misleading or downplaying facts. His mistake was assuming confidence could cover the gaps. For years, he cultivated an image of being untouchable, a sharp legal mind always a step ahead. But Crockett exposed the limits of that strategy. Confidence without preparation is fragile. It looks solid until it collides with someone armed with real substance. Crockett didn't just debate Barr. She dismantled him by being more prepared, more disciplined, and more anchored in truth. That's the real lesson in the long run. Preparation beats bravado. People aren't starved for drama in politics. They're starved for accountability. They've seen too many hearings where politicians talk past each other. Too many leaders who dodge with clever wordplay. What made this moment powerful is that it cut through the noise. For once, the lies didn't linger unchallenged. For once, the powerful weren't allowed to define the narrative. Viewers felt like someone was finally doing what they wished they could do. Look someone in the eye and say, "No, that's not the truth. And here's the proof." That's why it went viral. That's why people who don't normally care about hearings or politics stopped scrolling and paid attention. This wasn't just about one official being exposed or one reprises. Tentative rising to the occasion. It's about what it symbolizes. The exchange reflects a bigger battle unfolding across society. In politics, where spin often outweighs truth. In media, where soundbites replace substance. In everyday life, where misinformation spreads faster than correction. Crockett's moment with Barr is a microcosm of the fight every citizen faces in their own way. Whether it's challenging falsehoods in conversations, correcting misrepresentations online, or holding institutions accountable in their communities. Here's the deeper truth. Democracy doesn't survive on autopilot. It isn't self-sustaining. It requires people, ordinary people, willing to defend the truth when it matters most. That's what Crockett did in that chamber. She used her platform to push back, to remind the public that truth still has a place in our democracy. But the responsibility doesn't end with her. It extends to everyone who watched, everyone who shared the clip, everyone who nodded in agreement. The real question is, when it's your turn to confront falsehoods, whether in politics, work, or daily life, will you be ready? Democracy isn't a spectator sport. It survives only when ordinary people defend the truth. Politics can often feel like a distant chess match. Strategies played out by powerful figures in marble halls while the rest of us watch from the sidelines. But moments like the showdown between Bill Barr and Jasmine Crockett shatter that illusion. They remind us that politics is not abstract. It's real, it's immediate, and it affects us all. And here's the part many people miss: your role in this story is just as important as theirs. Think about what happened in that hearing. Barr came in armed with years of authority, reputation, and media-friendly soundbites. Crockett came in with research, persistence, and proof. The clash between the two created a spark that resonated far beyond that room. Now ask yourself, how many times have you witnessed someone in your own life bending the truth, twisting facts, or using confidence to mask deception? Maybe it's in politics, maybe at work, maybe even within your own social circles. Did you challenge them? Did you stay quiet? Did you wish later that you had spoken up? That hearing wasn't just about Barr versus Crockett. It was about you versus silence. A lot of people believe their individual voices don't matter in the grand scheme of things. That's the lie that keeps power unchallenged. But the truth is, democracy isn't defended by speeches in Washington alone. It's defended in classrooms, community meetings, and yes, even in online comment sections where misinformation spreads unchecked. Crockett didn't magically acquire her strength on that stage. It was built over years of learning to speak up, to ask the hard questions, to demand clarity. Every time she pushed back against falsehoods, she built the muscle of accountability. And you can too. You may not sit in Congress, but your workplace, your neighborhood, your family dinner table, all of those are arenas where truth and fiction collide. What you choose to do in those small moments adds up to something bigger. When was the last time you corrected someone who shared false information online? When was the last time you asked a tough question instead of letting a misleading answer slide? When was the last time you fact-checked something before repeating it? These actions might seem small, but they ripple outward. If Crockett's documents exposed Barr's narrative, your insistence on truth can expose misinformation in your own circle. That ripple effect matters more than you think. Don't let this moment stay just political entertainment. Too many of us treat politics like binge-watching a drama series. We tune in for the plot twists, the conflicts, the viral clips. But when the credits roll, we move on. Democracy isn't Netflix. It requires participation. Watching Crockett dismantle Barr may feel satisfying. But if it ends there, the lesson is lost. The real takeaway isn't just, wow, she destroyed him. The real takeaway is, how can I use this example in my own life to defend truth when it matters? Practical steps anyone can follow. Stay informed, not overwhelmed. Don't rely on headlines alone. Read beyond the soundbite. Take 10 extra minutes to understand the facts before forming an opinion. Fact check in real time. If someone shares something questionable, whether online or in person, pause and check before spreading it. Truth isn't just a defense, it's prevention. Speak up with respect. You don't have to attack people to challenge them. Crockett didn't scream. She presented evidence. You can do the same, firm, respectful, and factual. Engage in conversations, not arguments. The goal isn't always to win. Sometimes the win is planting a seed of doubt in misinformation. Sometimes it's showing others listening that truth still has defenders. Use your platforms. Social media, workplace discussions, community forums. These are your stages. Use them the way Crockett used hers, not for noise but for clarity. Imagine if millions of people took these small steps. Imagine if every misleading statement online met resistance. Imagine if every community had ordinary citizens willing to fact-check and hold leaders accountable. That's how democracy sustains itself, not through grand speeches, but through collective vigilance. Crockett showed us the power of one person standing firm, but the greater power lies in all of us standing together. So here's my challenge to you, the person watching this right now. When you see misinformation, will you ignore it or address it? When someone misleads with confidence, will you let it slide, or will you prepare yourself to respond with truth? When democracy asks for defenders, will you be one of them, or will you sit back and hope someone else steps up? Because in the end, this isn't just Crockett's story. It's your story too. And the next confrontation with lies might not happen in a congressional hearing. It might happen in your own life. When the dust settled on the clash between Bill Barr and Jasmine Crockett, one fact became undeniable. Truth still matters. Barr entered with the confidence of a seasoned insider armed with half-truths and the weight of his former office. Crockett countered with something far more powerful: evidence preparation and unshakable clarity. The result wasn't just a dramatic takedown. It was a reminder that rhetoric may be loud, but facts are louder. This moment should linger in your mind, not just because it was satisfying to watch, but because it carries a lesson for all of us. Democracy only survives when truth is defended again and again in every arena where lies take root. Think about what Crockett did. She didn't rely on theatrics. She didn't resort to shouting matches. She relied on preparation, on receipts, on proof. And that made the difference. Now ask yourself, what happens if we all take that same approach? What happens if instead of shrugging at misinformation, we meet it head on? What happens if instead of letting false confidence win, we come armed with facts? That is how democracy strengthens itself. Not in one viral hearing, but in millions of daily conversations where truth has a chance to breathe. And here's the reality: you have a role to play in that. Maybe you won't be cross-examining a former Attorney General, but you will face moments where truth is on trial in your own world. And when that moment comes, will you be ready? This channel is here for that reason: to break down the noise, to separate spin from fact, and to empower you to engage with clarity. So if you found this breakdown valuable, don't just click away. Be part of this community. Subscribe to stay informed. Comment with your thoughts. What stood out most to you in this exchange? Share this video with someone who needs to see how truth be. Add spin every time. Because the fight for democracy isn't happening somewhere far away. It's happening here now in moments just like this. And I'll leave you with this: in the end, democracy doesn't defend itself. That's our job. The question is, will you be ready when your moment comes?